Welcome to our deep dive into a topic I find fascinating. Monarchies.
Oh, interesting.
Especially, you know how they work in the modern world.
Right.
We're using this Wikipedia article about the Monarchy of Spain as our guide.
Okay.
And I'm super excited to have, well, you, an expert, to unpack all this.
I'll do my best. It's a long history. Centuries old, but still going today.
So, for those of us who don't know much about the specifics of the Spanish monarchy, where do we even start? Like, who's the king? And who comes next, like in line for the throne?
Right. So the current monarch is King Felipe VI.
Okay.
He came to the throne in 2014 after his father, Juan Carlos I, abdicated.
Oh, okay.
And as for who's next in line, that would be King Felipe's daughter, Princess Leonor. She's the heir apparent.
Princess Leonor, got it. So King Felipe VI, then Princess Leonor. Now, I know Spain has a really long history, and, well, monarchies have always been a part of that. This Wikipedia article even mentions, get this, roots going all the way back to the Visigoths.
Yeah, the Visigoths were around in the 5th century AD.
That's mind-blowing to me. So when did things start to look like the Spanish monarchy we know today?
Well, directly connecting it to the Visigoths is a bit of a stretch for understanding the modern system, but the late 15th century is key.
Okay.
And you had the Catholic monarchs, Isabella VII of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon.
Right, their marriage was a big deal.
Huge.
No.
But it didn't create a fully unified Spain like we see now. It was more like two powerful kingdoms coming together, each keeping its own structure. And this is important because it explains why the monarchy has such a complicated relationship with regional identities even today. Like, look at Catalonia and the Basque Country. They've got really strong regionalist feelings.
So even though there was this union, it wasn't like a perfectly blended Spain. The regions kept their own sense of themselves.
Precisely.
That makes sense, given some of the tensions in Spain today.
Yeah.
So how did the monarchy change after that?
Fast forward a few centuries, and you get to the Spanish Constitution of 1978. This was a big turning point. It made Spain a constitutional monarchy, which means the king's powers are limited by law.
So not an absolute monarch anymore. No more ruling by decree like in the old days.
Exactly. And what's crucial here is that the Constitution states very clearly, sovereignty comes from the people. They are the ultimate source of the king's authority.
That's a big difference from when monarchs thought they had divine right to rule.
Huge. I mean, even in 1812, when an earlier constitution tried to limit the monarch's power,
What happened?
it got rejected. So you can see how important that 1978 constitution is for understanding the modern Spanish monarchy.
Right, so the power rests with the people, and the king's role is more, I don't know, how does the Constitution even describe it?
It says he's an arbitrator and moderator.
Arbitrator, moderator, not a ruler.
Right.
More of a symbol of unity and keeping things stable.
You got it.
Interesting. So not just a figurehead, but definitely not all-powerful either.
It sounds like a tricky balance to strike. You could say that. And to really understand this balancing act, we need to look at the specific powers the king actually has under this constitution.
Let's do it. Like, what can he actually do? Could he just veto a law he doesn't like?
Well, he does have certain powers, but not a straight-up veto. One of the big ones is appointing the prime minister.
Okay.
Now, usually this lines up with the general election results, but the king does have some leeway in how this happens.
So he could pick someone, I don't know, unexpected.
It's possible, but super unlikely. The Constitution puts limits on him.
Right.
And he also needs to keep the public on his side. It's more about making sure the transfer of power is smooth, not pushing his own preferences.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So what about when a law is passed by Parliament? Does the king have to sign off on it? Can he just refuse?
Theoretically, yes. He doesn't have veto power exactly, but he could withhold his assent. That said, it's delicate. Remember when the King of Belgium refused to sign that law about legalizing abortion?
And that was a big deal.
Caused a huge uproar. But in Spain, Juan Carlos, I pretty much always supported what the government was doing.
So it's a power he has, but not one he uses very often. It seems like the king walks a fine line, asserting his authority, but also respecting what the people want.
Yeah, it's a tightrope walk, for sure. And there's one more important power we haven't talked about. His role as commander-in-chief of the armed forces.
The military. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Does that mean he's out there leading troops?
Not exactly, no. In practice, the government controls the military. But the king's role is super symbolic, rooted in tradition. Both Juan Carlos III and Felipe VI served in the military before becoming king. It's like a way of showing the monarchy's connection to defending the nation.
So it's less about actual military command and more about representing Spain's strength and security.
Right on.
Okay, I'm starting to get how these different powers fit into that arbitrator and moderator role. It's not about ruling with an iron fist.
No.
It's about keeping the system in balance, keeping things steady. Now, we've been focused on what the king's supposed to do, but I'm curious about his actual influence in Spain today. Is he really just a figurehead, or does he have some behind-the-scenes power?
That's a great question, and it's where things get even more interesting. The monarchy's popularity and its real clout have definitely gone up and down over the years. For a long time, they had really high approval ratings, but things changed around the 2008 financial crisis.
Right, that's when all the scandals started coming out. It felt like a real turning point.
It was a tough time. That crisis put so much pressure on Spanish society, and the monarchy wasn't immune. And some of those scandals, well, they really hurt the monarchy's image.
Let's talk about them. What were some of the biggest ones that rocked the monarchy?
Well, 2012 was a rough year. It started with news about King Juan Carlos Ari going on this extravagant elephant hunting trip to Botswana.
Wait, elephant hunting? While Spain was in the middle of a financial crisis. Not the best look.
Definitely not. It made the monarchy seem out of touch, uncaring about everyday people's problems.
Ouch. So a big hit to their image. Were there other scandals around this time?
There was the one with the king's son-in-law, the Duke of Palma de Mallorca.
Okay.
He was accused of embezzling public funds and using his royal connections to, line his own pockets.
Corruption's never good, especially for a royal. Sounds like the monarchy was taking some serious hits. Did Juan Carlos try to do anything to fix things?
He did. He talked about some of these issues in his Christmas Eve speeches, the ones he does every year.
Yeah.
He even apologized for the elephant hunting trip. That was pretty unheard of for a king.
A little humility, maybe, to win back some favor. Did it work?
To a degree. He also tried to be more transparent, like publishing the royal household's budget. But honestly, the damage was done.
And in the end, he abdicated. Handed the throne over to his son, Philippe VI.
Yes. There was a feeling that they needed a fresh start. Philippe VI is seen as more modern, more in tune with the times.
Wow, we've covered a lot already. It's clear the Spanish monarchy is way more complicated than I realized. It's not all about crowns and castles. There's a lot of political and social weight to it.
Absolutely. And we've just scratched the surface. There's still so much to uncover, like how the royal household actually works, those incredible royal residences, and even the monarchy's role in Spanish diplomacy and international relations.
This is fascinating. I'm definitely ready to keep going.
Yeah.
But maybe we need a little pause to let all this sink in.
Sounds good. I'm ready to keep exploring when you are.
We'll be right back after a quick break. Don't go anywhere. All right, I'm back, ready to peek behind the curtain of the royal household. I have to admit, I'm imagining like Downton Abbey. Butlers, grand staircases, the whole thing. What's it really like?
Well, it's definitely a big organization, lots of moving parts.
Okay.
They're responsible for supporting the monarch, the whole royal family, all their official duties, schedules, finances, communication, protocol, everything.
Sounds like a big operation, but maybe not quite Downton Abbey.
Right. Maybe not that dramatic.
So how's it all paid for? Does the government just give them a blank check?
Not exactly. They get an annual budget from the government.
So it's taxpayers footing the bill.
Yeah, but that budget has to be approved by Parliament. It's not just a free-for-all.
Right.
And especially after all those scandals, there's been a real push for transparency. Making it clear how the money's spent.
Makes sense. Transparency is always a good thing, especially when it comes to public funds. Speaking of which, what about the royal residences? I'm dying to hear about the palaces.
Well, I guess the most famous one is the Royal Palace of Madrid.
Yeah.
Or Palacio Real in Spanish. It's a grand palace, but mostly used for state functions and ceremonies, that kind of thing.
So the king and his family don't actually live there?
No. King Felipe VI and his family live at the Zarzuela Palace. It's just outside of Madrid, more of a private residence.
Zarzuela Palace, okay. I'll have to look that one up. Are there any other royal residences worth mentioning?
There's El Pardo Palace. That's often used for visiting dignitaries. And then there are all these historic buildings like monasteries, convents, former royal palaces. They're called royal sites.
Royal sites, what are those exactly?
They're owned by the Spanish state, but they're designated as historically or culturally important to the monarchy.
Huh.
They're managed by an organization called Patrimonio Nacional. And here's the interesting part. A lot of them are open to the public.
Wait, you're telling me I could actually visit a royal palace?
Yeah, when the royal family isn't using them, of course.
Boy, I had no idea.
They're pretty popular tourist spots. It's a really cool way to see the history of the Spanish monarchy up close.
So it's not like the monarchy is this totally isolated thing. It's actually connected to Spanish society in a very real way.
You got it. And that connection goes beyond just the physical spaces. The monarchy also plays a role in Spanish diplomacy, international relations.
Really? How so? Is the king out there, like, making deals with other countries?
He travels a lot representing Spain on the world stage, like a royal ambassador.
Huh.
King Juan Carlos. I was known for promoting democracy in Latin America, especially after all those dictatorships fell.
So it's a mix of formal diplomacy and, like, that soft power that comes with being a monarch.
Exactly. And remember how we talked about the king being commander-in-chief of the armed forces?
Yeah.
That gives him a certain standing globally, too.
Right, right. But I'm still wondering, how much does he actually influence foreign policy?
Yeah.
He's not calling all the shots, is he?
No, the government sets foreign policy. But the king, especially someone like Juan Carlos III, who had all those international relationships, can definitely have an impact.
So it's another delicate balance.
It is. He has to respect the government's role, but can also use the monarchy's unique position.
This is also interesting. It seems like the Spanish monarchy is constantly navigating these tricky situations, trying to be both traditional and modern, respecting the people, but also, holding on to a certain amount of power. I get why it's such a debated topic.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest debates is about the monarchy's relationship with the Spanish people. We talked about those scandals that hurt their popularity, but what's the feeling toward the monarchy today?
Yeah, is it still as popular as it used to be?
Public opinion is kind of divided. A lot of people still support the monarchy,
Okay.
but there's also a growing movement that wants a republic.
A republic? Really? I always thought Spain was super pro-monarchy.
For a long time they were, especially when Spain was transitioning to democracy after the Franco dictatorship.
Right.
King Juan Carlos, I was a huge part of making that transition peaceful. People really respected him for that. But that good feeling has faded a bit, especially after all the scandals we talked about.
So those scandals did some real damage.
Yeah, definitely. And I think younger generations who don't really remember Juan Carlos I and the transition are more open to a republic. They see the monarchy as old-fashioned, out of touch with modern Spain.
So the future of the monarchy is not so clear.
It's definitely uncertain. A lot depends on how King Felipe VI handles the challenges ahead.
He needs to keep the public support and show that the monarchy is still relevant in a world that's changing so fast. Another tough balancing act.
It sounds like it. This has been eye-opening. I had no idea how complicated the Spanish monarchy was. It's not just about the fancy stuff. It's a real institution with a deep history and a future that's, well, up in the air.
It really is, and that's what makes it so interesting to study. It's always changing, always a source of debate and intrigue.
Well, I'm hooked. Before we wrap up, I'd love to dig into this whole republic idea.
Okay.
Like, what would that even look like for Spain? Could it actually happen anytime soon?
That's a big question. We need some more time to really get into it.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So let's do that. Let's dive back in. All right, so republics, big topic. Like, we talked about how those scandals really hurt the monarchy's image.
Yeah.
But what are the actual arguments for and against having a republic in Spain? Well, for some people, especially those who lost trust in the monarchy after the scandals, a republic means a fresh start, a chance to build a system that's purely democratic, without all that baggage from the past.
So it's not just about, like, getting rid of the king.
Right. It's more fundamental. It's about changing how power is structured, how people see power.
Makes sense. And you mentioned younger generations.
Yeah, they often see the monarchy as, well, outdated. They say it clashes with modern Spanish values, ideas about equality, people earning their place, not just being born into it.
Interesting how these old traditions can bump up against how society is changing. But I'm guessing there are some strong reasons people want to keep the monarchy too.
Definitely. One of the biggest is stability. Say what you will about the monarchy, it's provided Spain with a sense of continuity, of unity, especially during tough times. Think about the transition to democracy after Franco. King Juan Carlos was crucial in making that peaceful. And a lot of people see the monarchy as, like, insurance against going back to that kind of authoritarian rule.
So it's the monarchy as this symbol of stability, holding the country together, especially since Spain has such a mixed-up history at times.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Then there's the economic side of things, too.
Okay.
Some people point to tourism, all those royal palaces, the ceremonies. It attracts tons of visitors every year.
So it's not just about the monarchy itself. It's tied up with Spain's culture and economy in a bigger way.
For sure. And then, of course, there's the emotional argument. For a lot of Spaniards, the monarchy is part of what it means to be Spanish. It's their history, their family legacy, everything.
It's really interesting how these debates aren't always just about logic.
Nope.
There's real emotion tied to the monarchy.
Absolutely. And that makes the whole thing even more complex. It's not just a checklist of pros and cons. You're dealing with people's deeply held beliefs.
You realize that this isn't just a political question.
It's not.
It's about what it means to be Spanish at its core.
That's a great way to think about it. The monarchy is so intertwined with Spanish society that any change would have huge ripple effects.
What about the practical stuff? Like, what would they do with all those palaces if they became a republic?
Right, that's one of the many things they'd have to work out.
Yeah.
Turn some into museums, maybe others into government buildings would be a big task.
And what about the head of state? Would they have, like, a president?
Probably. They'd have to figure out all the details, what powers the president would have, how they'd be elected. It would mean a major revamp of the whole political system.
Wow. This has been quite a journey. We started trying to figure out the basics of the Spanish monarchy, and now we're talking about, its potential end.
It's a lot to take in.
It makes you realize how complex these institutions are
Mm.
and how they shape a country's identity.
It's been great exploring this with you. The Spanish monarchy is a fascinating example of how tradition and modern ideas can clash, how power and symbolism all get mixed up. It's captivating and challenging, all at the same time.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that's the perfect takeaway for our listeners. The Spanish monarchy, its story isn't over. The future is uncertain. But one thing's for sure, it's going to keep people talking, spark debate, and maybe even a little drama for a long time to come.
Definitely will.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. I hope it gave you a lot to think about. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into the world around us.